As great of a trilogy as Pixar's Cars franchise was, the more I think about it, the more horrified I get about the idea of sentient cars. As anyone who has watched the movies will know, all of the cars in the world have been anthropomorphized into vehicles with very human-like mannerisms. But what if that's because, on the inside, the cars that we all met in the movies were actually humans? Be warned, because you're about to hear some disgusting ideas about what's inside each of the cars in the seemingly harmless Pixar universe. The first thing that you should know is that this is actually a combination of two popular Cars theories that work hand in hand with each other. The first of which is commonly referred to as the same universe theory. As the name of the theory suggests, it considers the idea that the Cars universe and our universe are the same and they take place during the same timeline. However, somewhere down the line, humanity ceased to exist and the sentient cars became the dominating life form on the planet. This is where the second theory comes into play though, which can only be really referred to as the homunculus theory. The homunculus theory is a dark and disturbing perspective that suggests that the humans actually did still exist within the Cars universe, they were just inside the cars the entire time. Only, instead of being inside of the cars, according to the theory, the humans had become the cars. Now, I know that's crazy. I mean, how would something like that even work, right? Well, first it's important to understand why some fans might think that humans could still exist within the Cars universe without ever being shown in the movie, and it seems like that it's because the cars still cater to humans, or at least they were designed like they do. All of the cars shown in the Pixar film still have features that were created specifically for the humans that drove them. This includes passenger and driver's side windows and even a rear windshield. If there weren't humans in them, the cars would only need a windshield on the front of them because that's where their eyes are. Not a single time in any of the Cars movies did the eyes move onto the side windows to look out of them. On top of that, the cars also still have doors that theoretically should still open as if someone would be able to get in or out of them. This is not only a hint that at some point in the Cars universe, humans existed and invented the vehicles, but some fans also see it as a hint that humans were still around. Another massive hint that the living cars and humans shared the same universe and possibly even combined into one being was the fact that cars could still talk to each other, and I mean literally talk, in multiple languages too. There would be no reason for cars to still use our language or form of communication if humans didn't exist anymore. They would probably just honk at each other in some code of sorts. But if this theory is right, and humans had become cars, then that would explain why they continued using their original language, and why cars even seem to keep up with their individual cultures throughout the trilogy. Which brings us to a really horrifying question concerning the homunculus theory. How in the world would a human become a car? How exactly does that even happen? Well, we'll talk about why it might have happened in a minute, but as for how it happened, it all boils down to science. Be warned though, the homunculus theory is truly horrifying. On the surface, the idea of humans living in their cars and staying in them full time might seem relatively harmless, but it goes much further than that. You see, according to the theory, humans were forced to spend their entire lives trapped inside of their vehicles, and because of that, they had to learn to adapt or maybe even evolve. As far as the external body of the cars is concerned, the theory suggests that they're still very similar to the cars that have been designed and constructed by mankind long before they became trapped in them. As far as the interior of the car is concerned though, you'll have to thank random fans on the internet for that, because they came up with a pretty detailed imagining of what it would look like. The car itself would be sort of like an insect's exoskeleton for the human inside. The human inside the car would essentially be installed into the vehicle, and from there it would act as the equivalent to the car's circulatory and nervous system. This is where it starts to get pretty twisted. The human inside the car wouldn't be sitting down, but instead it would be hoisted up into a position where it could control everything more comfortably. Once inside the car, the human would be placed horizontally and then hooked up to a series of tubes and shafts that would allow them to control the car. And yes, these tubes would include one for solid waste removal and one for liquid waste removal. On top of that, the human inside would have their eyes connected to a visor that would magnify them directly onto the windshield so that they could see properly. This is where the massive eyes that each of the cars have in the Pixar film come into play. According to the theory, beneath the visor and hooked up to the human's mouth within the car would be a breathing apparatus that also had a microphone built into them. That would allow the humans to communicate with each other from within the cars, and also explain why they maintain their traditional languages. If that's not a horrifying enough picture for you, then wait until you hear how the humans would eat if this theory were true. Since they clearly wouldn't be able to get in and out of the car, the humans would have yet another tube hooked up to them. This time, it would be connected right to their abdomen and would distribute a nutritional paste that would provide them with proper nourishment. In other words, if this theory was true, the humans wouldn't be inside of the cars, they would literally be the cars. So the big question is, why did the humans trap themselves in the cars to the point where they became them? To be honest, it's a pretty horrific path that seems like something that a sci-fi movie would warn us could happen. You see, it would all start with how comfortable humans became within the confines of their own cars. As you know, every year cars become more and more comfortable and, in a way, more intelligent. Much like in our own universe, the theory suggests that humans in the Cars universe also saw the potential of improving their motor vehicles. As of right now, more than 25,000 cars with self-driving functions have been sold in the world, and that number is projected to grow like crazy. Well, according to the theory, in the Cars universe, this trend continued until every vehicle in the world became autonomous and could drive itself, allowing the driver to relax inside. With this relaxation, the theory claims that humans continue to make their cars more comfortable and more like small homes away from home. In fact, it apparently got so bad, and the cars got so many amenities, that the humans became entirely dependent on cars to survive. I know what you're thinking though. No matter how comfortable cars get, humans wouldn't decide to never leave them. But what if they didn't have a choice? You see, according to both the same universe theory and the homunculus theory, mankind went through an apocalypse of sorts that changed the course of the future as humans knew it. It's unclear exactly what would have caused the apocalypse in this case. It could have been any number of things, from natural disasters to something virus-related. But no matter what caused the cataclysmic event, the important thing to note is that according to the theory, it wiped out the majority of human life on the planet. Basically, anything outside of a car or shelter was doomed, and then even afterward, they were trapped. You see, whatever it was that wiped out most of the living things on Earth left lingering effects that made it impossible for the surviving humans to step outside of their shelters, which for many were their cars. The theory doesn't go into too many details, so it could have been an airborne toxin or some other threat that trapped people within their cars. Either way, there was no leaving them. Interestingly enough, that would also explain why there were no animals shown throughout any of the movies, only vehicles that looked or acted like them. Now, according to this theory, with the humans being trapped inside of the cars, they would have had to figure out a way to survive, which meant advancing technology that worked for both them and the vehicles that they were living in. As time passed, though, a symbiotic relationship would form between the human and their car as both became very dependent on one another. This is where the homunculus theory comes back into play, because as the humans and their cars developed together, eventually they just decided to become one. The humans felt that it would be safer to engineer themselves into the cars, so that they would never have to risk a situation where they would be forced outside. This acted as a sort of evolution for both mankind and vehicles that would result in all the high-tech tubes and systems that I mentioned earlier. And eventually, hundreds or maybe even thousands of years would have passed, and the car-human homunculi would have fully adapted to their new lifestyles. Meaning that by the time the Cars franchise came around, the main characters of the movies might not have even known where they came from or what they once were. Now, I know that's a lot to take in, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this theory. It might be disgusting, but do you think there's any chance that humans might have combined their existence with the Cars in Pixar's hit universe? Be sure to let me know in the comments below.